Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And as always, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me this information in some which way, shape, or form. A lot of what you see here is from them, so thank you. David Walker, Barrett Peterson, Jason Dance, Chris Fallon, and Jacqueline Wolf. Guys, thank you so much. And if you have a tip for me, please feel free to send it my way, and I will give you a shout out here and on my nationally syndicated radio show as well. And with that, let's start with the county of Mobile, Alabama. Now, this is an update from their May data breach, which I first reported on. I went back and looked. Now, Mobile County government officials acknowledged for the first time this past Friday that their May 24th cyber attack may have compromised sensitive employee information. 90 gigabytes of data was stolen in that attack. We will see what happens, but heads up to you if you are an employee of Mobile County in Alabama. Moving on, let's talk about Spreadshirt, Spreadshop, and Team Shirts. Basically, one company, three different brands. Now, clients of Spreadshirt, Spreadshop, and Team Shirts have been warned of a data breach that basically exposed the details of customers, partners, and employees. And basically, that got stolen. Looks like a ransomware attack. Now, news of this breach first emerged this past Thursday when customers were warned by an email of a security incident that involved an unauthorized third party. An email sent to users warned that their postal addresses, bank account details, and or PayPal addresses and password hashes that were saved before 2014 basically have been breached, and the attackers managed to gain when the attackers managed to gain access to some of the company's servers. So if you've been a long-time customer of Spreadshirt, Spreadshop, and Team Shirts, I'm assuming they're all different types of shirts and whatnot, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about the price comparison website out of Switzerland known as Comparis.ch. Last Wednesday, Comparis, which has about 80 million visitors a year, was shut down by ransomware attackers demanding 400,000 US or 370,000 Swiss francs in basically cryptocurrency to bring them back online. By last Friday, the website was operational again, and a Comparis spokesperson told SWI, which is a local news reporting organization in Switzerland, that no ransom had been paid. Now, the company initially said that it believed that no customer data had been breached. However, on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, a week after the attack, basically the Zurich police said detailed analysis had shown that the perpetrators of the attack had indeed gained access to certain internal customer data belonging to Comparis. The investigators assume that the certain data was stolen, and this is basically customer data of Credaris AG, which is a subsidiary of Comparis. Now, the company said in a statement that it had directly informed those potentially affected, and it's strongly recommended that all of its customers change their passwords ASAP out of precaution. Moving on. Let's talk about Cardinal Contracting. They're notifying 4,519 people nationwide who have been impacted by a recent data breach that exposed their personal data, including medical information. Cardinal Contracting began notifying individuals on July 13th about this breach. According to their media release, the information impacted by this event, quote, varied by individual, but may include certain individuals' names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, financial information, health insurance information, and medical information. So if you have anything to do with Cardinal Contracting, you might want to check in. Moving on, excuse me. Let's talk about the Iowa-based People's Community Health Clinic. I've been doing a lot of Iowa lately. Something's going on in that state. Now, People's Community Health Clinic notified patients on June 29th that a recent cyber attack may have impacted their private information. They said they became aware of suspicious activity related to an employee email account on March 22nd, and the information involved in this cyber attack was potentially patients' names, addresses, social security numbers, dates of birth, driver's license numbers, state IDs or government IDs, medical diagnosis, treatment information, health insurance information, and credit card payment info as well. So if you use the People's Community Health Clinic for all your health needs in Iowa, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about Dotty's. Now, Dotty's operates about 120 gaming venues in the state of Nevada, known for gaming. Now, they just got hit with a malware attack. I don't have much information on this, but they acknowledge that some of their 300,000 users' data, such as names, dates of birth, may have leaked out earlier this year. And so obviously I will keep you up to date, but if you use a Dotty's facility somewhere in the state of Nevada, heads up to you. You may be one of those 300,000. Moving on. Let's talk about a charity known as Mermaids. They apparently focus on transgender rights and other issues for the transgender community. They were just fined £25,000 by the UK protection watchdog, the Information Commissioner's Office, or ICO. Now, the regulator received a data breach report from the charity about an internal email group that it had set up and used between August of 2016 to July of 2017, so 11 months, and then they decommissioned it. The charity only became aware that it was breached in June of 2019. Now, the ICO found that the group was created with insufficiently secure settings, leading to about 780 pages of confidential emails being viewable online for nearly 3 years. This led to personal information, such as names and email addresses of 550 people, being searchable online. The personal data of 24 of those people were sensitive, as it revealed how the person was coping and feeling, I'm assuming with their transgenderness, and with another 15 classified as a special category data, as mental and physical health and sexual orientation were exposed. So that's obviously a very huge problem. The transgender community is unfortunately very heavily targeted in countries, and so hopefully they're getting that cleaned up. But if you're in the UK and you have anything to do with Mermaids, the charity there, you definitely want to check in. Moving on. Let's talk about Lamb Financial Mortgage Brokers out of Vermont. This is coming from an official disclosure in the state of Vermont. I don't have much information, but they got hit basically with ransomware on April 8th, and social security numbers, date of birth, and in some cases, bank account numbers, driver's license, and government IDs were exposed. So if you use Lamb Financial Mortgage Brokers for all your mortgage needs, you definitely want to give them a shout. Moving on, let's talk about the San Diego, California-based Clear Balance. They're a loan provider that helps patients basically spread out the cost of their hospital bills. They had an email security breach on April 26th of this year when an attacker attempted to make a fraudulent wire transfer. It's also known as a business email compromise scam. Now, they confirmed that the breach was limited to the email environment. No other systems were impacted and all of that. But we are talking about potentially having exposed names, tax IDs, social security numbers, dates of birth, government issued ID numbers, telephone numbers, healthcare account numbers, balance amounts, dates of service, clear balance, loan numbers and balances, personal banking information, clinical information, health insurance information, and full face photographic images. The majority of the individuals did not have their personal health information in particular impacted, but we will see. So if you've ever emailed Clear Balance as you're possibly using them for a loan or thinking about it, you might want to check in. You may have been exposed. Moving on, I want to give you guys an update on Excellion. Every week I'm talking about a new company or country or organization that is using Excellion, and this week it's the University of Maryland, which previously disclosed, but now they added 30,468 patients to the list of their people that were affected by this breach. So if you use the University of Maryland, it just got worse. Definitely check in. Moving on. Let's talk about Campbell, Conray, and O'Neill PC, just straight up known as Campbell from now on. They're a U.S. law firm that counsels dozens of Fortune 500 and Global 500 companies, and they disclosed a data breach following a February 2021 ransomware attack, so you know this is good. The attackers were able to access, quote, certain individuals' names, dates of birth, driver's license numbers, state IDs, financial account information, social security numbers, passport numbers, payment card information, medical information, health information, biometric data, and or online account credentials such as usernames and passwords, and of course the kitchen sink. So basically some of their past and current clients include, and strap yourselves in because we may be seeing more disclosures, Exxon, Apple, Mercedes, who just went through a data breach, Boeing, Home Depot had a huge data breach years ago, British Airways just settled a data breach, Dow Chemical, Allianz Insurance, they basically insure airlines, Universal Health Services, Marriott International, we all know what they went through, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Time Warner, and many, many others. So we may see some huge disclosures coming up thanks to the Campbell, Conray, and O'Neill PC law firm in the United States. Moving on, I want to give you guys an update on Kaseya because we are starting to see disclosures, and that would be Just Tech IT, a basically IT support company out of Miami in Florida. Now, Just Tech obviously got hit, but also the clients would have been affected as well. So it's not just the MSP or managed service provider. If they've got 100 clients that were impacted, we may see 100 disclosures. This is a huge problem. We're going to see a lot of this, and like I said, you'll be hearing about Kaseya from me for quite some time. Moving on, let's talk about Moldova, the country of Moldova's Court of Accounts. Now, their Court of Accounts suffered a cyber attack, leading basically to their public databases and audits being destroyed. Now, the Court of Accounts of Moldova, is a government authority that performs audits of public financial resources and government agencies to comply with international standards. The attack had basically forced the agency to shut down its website while the incident was being investigated, and they're seeing if they can restore the data. I wonder if somebody was under investigation in Moldova, and how do you hide that fact? You delete everybody. You get rid of the evidence for everybody. I'm wondering, we will see what happens. Maybe it's state-sponsored. We don't know, but if I know, I will let you know as well. Now, moving on, and you will never guess who this next breach is about. That's right, billion-dollar fashion brand Guess has sent out letters to an unknown number of people whose information was lost during a ransomware attack this past February. Unauthorized access to certain Guess systems between February 2nd through the 23rd led to a breach of social security numbers, driver's license numbers, passports, and financial account information. And I don't have to guess that they need better security. So heads up to you if you have anything to do with Guess. Moving on, let's talk about the Russian Defense Ministry. Basically, they just got targeted with a foreign cyber attack, according to government officials in Moscow this past Friday. Now, the ministry said its website was targeted by a distributed denial of service attack that originated from outside of Russia. State-owned news outlet Sputnik reported that the digital assault did not cause any infrastructure damage. The ministry's website was restored a short while later after that, and the cyber attack came basically on the same day that the Russian and U.S. delegations are expected to meet, or rather were expected to meet, to discuss digital security. So there you go. If you recall, U.S. President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin committed earlier this month to continue talks about information security and fighting cybercrime, and obviously there have been tensions recently between Russia and the United States over various attacks against U.S. targets that were said to have originated from Russia, SolarWinds, Colonial Pipeline, JBS, etc., etc. So we'll see where that goes, but it looks like the Russian Defense Ministry is back on their feet after a cyber attack, and we'll see. Moving on. Let's talk about CNT, because CNT is Ecuador's state-run telecom carrier that offers things like fixed phone line service, mobile service, satellite TV, internet connectivity, etc. And they had a ransomware attack via Ransom EXX. It impacted their integrated service centers and contact center. And basically, they also stated that if you are outstanding on your bill right now, you basically now have a grace period as they bring that back and restore that. So hopefully Ecuador's CNT will get back on their feet, and hopefully they will no longer be impacted. That's all I've got. Let's move on. With that, let's talk about insurance technology startup Back9. You probably are not familiar with them, but they might have actually processed your personal information if you applied for insurance in the past few years to one of the huge insurance companies here in the United States. They had an Amazon S3 bucket that was misconfigured because nobody knows how to configure these things, and 711,000 files inside, including completed insurance applications that contain highly sensitive personal and medical information on the applicant and also their families. It contains images of the individual signatures, as well as other internal Back9 files. And so we are talking full name, address, phone numbers, but also social security, medical diagnosis, medications, completed questionnaires. Other files included lab and test results, such as blood work, electrocardiogram. Some applications also had driver's license numbers. The exposed documents date back to about 2015, and they basically go from 2015 to as recently as July of this year, this month. Now, Back9 works with some of the world's largest insurance carriers, which is why this is a huge problem. And many of their applications were found in this exposed bucket. And we are talking AIG, Transamerica, John Hancock, Lincoln Financial Group, Prudential, and more. So obviously this is going to impact a massive swath, just like the previous one. We are literally living in the era of supply chain hacking. That's going to be a huge problem. So you don't use Back9, but they probably have your data, especially if you've been applying for insurance to any of those. And finally, and we've got a couple finalies for you, we are actually going to be talking about SolarWinds again, because a new issue has recently cropped up for them, and obviously we're on high alert given basically the past disaster that they put the world through. Now, this one is basically a Microsoft discovered problem that a critical SolarWinds zero-day flaw or vulnerability was under active attack, and this is something that Microsoft caught. Now, They discovered the exploits and privately reported them to SolarWinds, and SolarWinds then basically published an advisory this past Friday. SolarWinds said the attacks are entirely unrelated to the supply chain attack in December, this past December. That's when the bomb dropped. And I quote, Microsoft has provided evidence of limited targeted customer impact through SolarWinds, though SolarWinds does not currently have an estimate of how many customers may be directly affected by the vulnerability. SolarWinds is unaware of the identity of the potentially affected customers. Now, according to SolarWinds, only SolarWinds' ServU Managed File Transfer and ServU Secure FTP, and by extension, the ServU Gateway, a component of those two products, are affected by this vulnerability, which allows attackers to remotely execute malicious code on vulnerable systems. SolarWinds has already updated this. You can go download their hotfixes, which I highly recommend if you are using the ServU anything from SolarWinds. Also, if you need to do this in an emergency, you can simply disable the SSH capability, and that will shut the exploit down as well. Obviously, a huge problem. Microsoft caught it being actively exploited. Hopefully, it wasn't state-sponsored attackers again. We will see. And finally, this is a holy cow. Like, wow. I had a couple of people actually send this one to me, and it's absolutely bonkers. But we are talking about journalists and activists worldwide. And here's what's going on. Military-grade spyware licensed by an Israeli firm to governments for tracking terrorists and criminals was used in basically in attempted and successful hacks of 37 smartphones belonging to journalists, human rights activists, business executives, and 2 women close to the murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, according to an investigation by the Washington Post and 16 media partners of the Post worldwide. Now, the phones appear on a list of 50,000 numbers that are concentrated in countries that are known to engage in surveillance of their citizens and also known to basically be clients of the Israeli firm NSO Group, a worldwide leader in growing and largely unregulated private spyware, and that's according to this investigation. Now, the list does not identify who put the numbers on it or why, and it is unknown how many of these phones were targeted or surveilled, but forensic analysis of these 37 smartphones show that many display a tight correlation between timestamps associated with the number on the list and the initiation of the surveillance, and in some cases as brief as just a few seconds. Now, Forbidden Stories, which is a Paris-based journalism nonprofit, and Amnesty International, a human rights group, had access to the list and shared it with basically news organizations, which did further research and analysis. Basically, everybody was looking into this. Amnesty International's Security Lab also did forensic analysis on the smartphones. Now, the numbers on the list are unattributed, but reporters were able to identify more than 1,000 people spanning more than 50 countries through research and interviews on 4 continents, several Arab royal family members, at least 65 business executives, 85 human rights activists, 189 journalists, and more than 600 politicians and government officials, including cabinet ministers, diplomats, and military and security officers as well. The numbers of several heads of state and prime ministers were also on that list. Now, somebody's surveilling everybody. Now, among the journalists whose number appeared on the list, which dates to 2016, are reporters working overseas for several leading news organizations, including a small number from CNN, the Associated Press, Voice of America, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Le Monde in France, the Financial Times in London, and Al Jazeera out of Qatar. Now, the targeting of the 37 smartphones would appear to conflict with the stated purpose of NSO's licensing of their Pegasus spyware. It's known as Pegasus, which the company says is intended only for use in surveilling terrorists and major criminals. Now, the evidence extracted from these smartphones reveal basically calls into question pledges by NSO, the Israeli company, to police its clients for human rights abuses. The media consortium analyzed the list through interviews and forensic analysis of these phones by comparing the details with previously reported information about the NSO. Amnesty International's Security Lab examined 67 smartphones then where the attacks were suspected outside of that original 37. Now, of those, 23 were successfully infected and 14 showed signs of attempted penetration. In lengthy responses, NSO called the investigation's findings exaggerated and baseless. It also said it does not operate the spyware licensed to its clients and has no insight into their specific intelligence activities, meaning once you've bought it from NSO, you can can do whatever the heck you want, and somebody has been getting busy. Now, NSO describes its customers as 60 intelligence, military, and law enforcement agencies in 40 countries, although it will not confirm the identities of any of them, citing client confidentiality obligations. The consortium also found many of the phone numbers in at least 10 country clusters, which were subjected to deeper analysis: Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Hungary, India, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Morocco, Rwanda, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Citizen Lab out of Toronto also found evidence that all 10 basically have been clients of NSO, according to Bill Marsack, a senior research fellow there, meaning those countries' governments were basically clients of NSO. They are also very known for state surveillance. Now, here's how Pegasus works overall. First things first, you have a target. Somebody is going to send what's known as a trap link to a smartphone that basically persuades the victim to tap or activate the link, or it might activate itself without any input, as in the most sophisticated zero-click hacks, which is something that we've seen rather recently. Well, it's been around for a while, but we've seen research of that recently on both iPhone and Android. Now, after that, we go to the infection stage. The spyware captures and copies the phone's most basic functions. NSO marketing materials show this, and basically it will do things like record from the cameras and microphones, collect location data, call logs, contacts, all that kind of stuff, and then it tracks. That's the final stage. The implant basically, or this infection, secretly reports the information to an operative who can then use it to map out sensitive details of the victim's life. Now, Pegasus is engineered to evade defenses on both iPhones and Android, so iPhone people, you are not immune from this. I hate that marketing hype. You guys get infected. I just unscrewed a MacBook like 2 days ago. So with that, basically, it leaves very little trace when it's on an iPhone or an Android. Familiar privacy measures like strong passwords and encryptions aren't much help against Pegasus, which can attack phones without any warning to the users because it's already integrated there. It can read anything on the device that a user can, while also stealing photos, recordings, location records, communications, passwords, call logs, social media posts. Spyware also can activate cameras and microphones for real-time surveillance, as I mentioned. So obviously, this is a huge problem. This actually takes me back to when the United Arab Emirates was caught using an exploit in the iPhones only, known as Karma, was very similar to this. But apparently somebody, one of NSO's clients, I'm assuming it's one of their clients, and they haven't been broken into and somebody's stolen this software, is essentially leveraging their Pegasus software to surveil people from around the globe, politicians that could potentially be a threat, or military that could potentially be a threat, or journalists that could be a threat as they are writing on you or whatever they're doing, not to mention others. The Saudi royal family as well is being spied on. There's a ton of people here. This is obviously a very deep issue. One of the things at the Washington Post, which is why I use them, and I got a lot of links from a lot of people from the other media's consortium, like The Guardian, for example, was another one that I got. But I use the Washington Post because what they mentioned was essentially that there is an unregulated spyware software, market for Android and iPhone. I know I can go and download and buy, spyware that I can integrate into one of those phones to capture that information, and that could be just to, track employees as you install it, into a computer or a mobile phone. But in this case, it looks like the government is really, or a government or some intelligence agency of a government is really going to work, because obviously they are the ones that would be most interested in this kind of information. The hacking groups are usually more on money or social change unless there's some massive surveillance. So we're going to see where this goes. This is obviously a huge, huge problem, but those were your breaches of the week. Were you infected? Well, you might have been if you were a royal Saudi, and we'll leave it at that. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, guys.